Are the Rams dusting off an old blueprint at a new position in an attempt to run it back in 2022?
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, your team every single day. My name is Travis Rogers. I am your host of Locked On Rams. I also host the Rams pregame show and postgame show on their flagship station, 710 ESPN, right here in Los Angeles. I've been doing that since the Rams came back to LA way back in 2016. Been a pretty good run since 2016. Don't forget to click that subscribe button in your podcast feed. That's good news for you. That's good news for me. You get your team every day, and I get all the wonderful things that come along with subscribers. And Locked On Rams on YouTube. We've got it posted up on YouTube as well, and you can see my lovely face. And today we've got a little Jimmy Neutron hair thing going on right here, which is pretty exciting for me because I don't have much of it to begin with. Okay, here's what I want to talk about today on today's pod. I want to talk about how the Rams may be a defensive first team coming into 2022, at least at the early part of the season. That's coming up in just a little bit. Plus, the Rams have made some moves in the special teams department. They have signed a new punter. That's one of the many changes that I think they're going to see in the special teams department coming up in the season. That's coming up in just a little bit. But let's talk about the thing that we've talked about arguably the most this offseason. I think that of all the topics, other than maybe Andrew Whitworth's retirement, maybe Sean McVay, maybe going to TV, Aaron Donald kind of flirting with the idea of retirement. But as far as the football goes, as far as what the Rams may look like coming up next season, the acquisition of Bobby Wagner, I think, has taken probably more words from me and ink from other people and internet and everything else. He's an incredible player. The Rams also drafted a middle linebacker last year, Ernest Jones, who played in the Super Bowl and played pretty well along the way. And you heard Les Snead talk about this yesterday. He did a press conference and was talking about how he thinks that they can use both Jones and Wagner simultaneously, that they could be on the field at the same time. Perhaps, that's really a job of Raheem Morris to figure out if that's something that's going to work for them, whether or not they are redundant or whether or not they're complementary. And I think you can scheme that out a million different ways, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't until you see it in action. I think it's a big question mark. I don't know, right? We will see. I think if Raheem Morris were being honest, I don't know if he knows. I don't think if Bobby Wagner and Ernest Jones know. But let's just kind of put that aside for a second and talk about it more from a 30,000-foot view. Think about when the Rams drafted Joe Noteboom a few years ago. What did they draft him for? They drafted him to become the left tackle of the future, to take over and anchor an offensive line that at the time needed a lot of work. Now, simultaneously, they also went out and picked up Andrew Whitworth. They went out and got a guy that was an established NFL player, that was one of the best at his position and has a reputation of being not just a great football player, but a better teammate, a great leader, somebody that the entire organization is better served by just having in the building on a daily basis. Okay, let's fast forward to where we are right now. Where we are right now is Andrew Whitworth lasted a lot longer than I think everybody expected, probably himself included. You heard him talk about when he was coming out here to LA after he signed the deal with Cincinnati, that he was saying that he told his wife, look, we're going to go somewhere and we're not going to get to experience the success. We're going to be the foundation that leads to the success ultimately, but we're probably not going to get to enjoy the fruits of all of that. Well, he was wrong. Thankfully for him, thankfully for everybody else, that he did lay a foundation, that he did build a culture that is going to be sustainable moving forward, hopefully. But he also got to enjoy the success, ultimately winning the Super Bowl last year. That's good news for him. But what he also did was mentor the entire offensive line, but in particular, Joe Noteboom. We've heard Noteboom talk about this a couple of different times, about trying to fill in for Andrew Whitworth, about trying to step into the role, the football role that he's leaving moving forward, and how to prepare and how to diet and how to train and how to lead and do all of the things that come along with being a high-level NFL player. Sound familiar? Does that sound like something that's taking place right now? And look, I don't know if Ernest Jones is as good of a football player as Joe Noteboom is. Well, time will tell, right? That's impossible to tell. Nobody's crystal ball is that accurate. but the format is pretty similar, right? You've got two guys that basically play the same position. One guy is as accomplished as you could possibly imagine. Bobby Wagner, we've talked about this. In the last 5 years, he's been first team defensive all-pro 4 times. Pretty darn good. Bobby Wagner is probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. He's that good of a player. Bobby Wagner was one of the best free agent players available on the entire market, and the Rams got it done. You know what else everybody talks about with him? Is the impact he has in a locker room, the impact he has on culture, the impact he has on leadership, all of the things that go along with not just tackling and shedding blocks and rushing the quarterback and all of those things, but do you make the organization better with your presence? And without exception, everybody expects that to be true with Bobby Wagner. You don't think that Ernest Jones is going to benefit being around that? You don't think that whether or not they're on the field at the same time really is not nearly as important as whether or not they're in the meeting room at the same time, whether or not they're in the weight room at the same time, whether or not they're at the hotel at the same time, preparing for a game at the same time, stretching at the same time. All of these things, there aren't too many guys you'd rather have teach your next generation of players than guys like Andrew Whitworth and Bobby Wagner. Now, neither one of these guys were drafted by the Rams originally. Neither one of these guys started their careers in LA. But they could do as much for them, moving forward beyond the time they're done. Bobby Wagner's got some time left. I'm not saying that he's going to come in here 1 year as an old man mentor and then move it down the road. But who knows, right? Maybe that this works out the same way it did with Whitworth. Maybe that works out the same way it did with Joe Noteboom. That you have an established veteran that has the respect of everybody just by everything that they've accomplished in this league. People are going to listen. People are going to follow. If Andrew Whitworth says, this is the way I get ready to do it, this is the way I watch film, this is the way I prepare my body, this is the way that I do this, that, and the other thing, you'd be an idiot not to listen. Same thing with Bobby Wagner. And I think that the Rams considered that when they're thinking about how they want to do this. A, can he help us win games? That's number one, obviously. Yes, he can. Can we fit him in economically? Yep, we can make that happen. Does he make our team better away from just the games on Sunday? Does he change our culture in a positive way? Does he fit into the culture that we've already established? Yes and yes. I think it's very exciting for where they've gone, where they're going. And this is another good example of what they're trying to build. And I don't think you can give Sean McVay enough credit for this. He knows what he needs. He knows the type of guys that he needs. He needs really good football players. And he also needs guys that can continue to teach the next generation of really good football players. There aren't going to be a ton of guys that are as gifted as Bobby Wagner. There just aren't. But you can prepare like Bobby Wagner. You can prepare like Andrew Whitworth. And that's half the battle. If you got enough ability to be in the NFL to start with and you start doing those sorts of things, you can get close enough that it can make a pretty damn good impact. And I think that's part of the reason that the Rams did what they did. Okay, coming up in just a second, the Rams signed a new punter, Johnny Hekker, who's been the punter for a very long time. He is out. The new man is in. What does it mean for the Rams special teams? That is coming up in just a bit. But how about this? Look, if you're anything like me, and I think most of us are, guys in particular, sometimes we're not super great at holding on to some things along the way. We lose things, maybe we break things. Listen to this. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company that gives you the features of very expensive sunglasses, $200 sunglasses, for a fraction of the cost. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed, durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, this is the biggie for me, right? Something you do not find anywhere else. Is the Shady Rays Insane Protection Program. Nobody does this. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection for every pair. Here's what it means. They will send you a new pair if you lose them. No matter what happened. Doesn't matter. If you lost them, okay, here's a new pair. That's what they do. It's as simple as that. Plus, you're going to feel good about it too. 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays exclusively for our listeners. So head to shadyrays.com and use the code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's the code. You know it by now. Locked On for their best deal of the season. 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. And if you lose them, you get a new pair. How about that? Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every day. Now make sure that you're also following Locked On NFL. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It too is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're doing that, why don't you click subscribe on Locked On Rams? Click subscribe on Locked On Rams on YouTube. You can't subscribe to me and my brilliance nearly enough, right? Make sure you do that. You get the podcast in your feed every single day. Okay, so we know that the Rams moved on from Johnny Hekker a few weeks ago. They released him after what was an unbelievable career. Put it to you this way: how often do fans of a football team have an emotional connection to the punter? Not very often. Let me take it to another step. How often do you see a football team when you go to the games, when you're at the stadium, whether it was at the Coliseum, whether it was at SoFi Stadium for the last year or so, and you see jerseys of the punter? There were I never went to a single Rams game where I did not see at least one, if not multiple, Johnny Hekker jerseys, right? Aaron Donald, sure. Matthew Stafford, of course. Todd Gurley, Jared Goff, the guys that we're talking about for the last several years, the best players on the team, the guys that are on Pro Bowls, the guys that show up on cereal boxes, all that. The punter? Come on, man, forget that. Johnny Hekker had people wearing his jersey at the stadium. So it just kind of speaks to the impact that he had on the organization. Like I talked about when they announced that they were going to move on from him. He was arguably kind of the face of the team for that first year. As weird as that sounds, he was the guy because he's charismatic, he's glib, he's got a sense of humor, and he was willing. He was willing to talk. He was willing to go on talk shows. He was willing to sit around and talk about the team. Go out to training camp. They'd bring Johnny Hekker over. That's just kind of the way it went because he was good at all those things for all those reasons that I just mentioned. Some of the other guys, not so much. Jared Goff was a rookie. Aaron Donald's not really into that. Todd Gurley really wasn't into that. It just didn't really work out quite like that, but it did for Johnny Hekker. So a lot of people were sad to see him go. They've replaced him with Riley Dixon. So Riley Dixon punted for the New York Giants last year. He averaged 39 and a half yards, and that's a net average. A long as 63. Those are punting numbers, whatever. He pinned guys inside the 20-yard line 24 times during the season. That's 11th best in the league. So that's top third. Here, I think is where the Rams are kind of going with their special teams. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Riley Dixon can fit into this role. Johnny Hekker was not only a very, very good punter, which he was not only somebody that was popular, which he was a weapon, right? He was a weapon that you could use not just because he had a big leg and he could flip the field, not just because he would do those crazy watermelon kicks that would splat on the 5-yard line and not go anywhere, kick out of bounds right away. He was a master at that kind of stuff. But it would feel like at least a few times a year, they would have Johnny Hekker throw a pass. They would have Johnny Hekker run a fake. And it was a part of what they do. Now, I don't know if you make your decisions on your punter based on what sort of arm that they have or not, but it'll be interesting to see whether or not we get those sorts of moments from Riley Dixon along the way. The special teams have kind of turned over quite a bit. Remember, for a long time, it was Greg Zuerlein. Then there was a little bit of a revolving door. And then finally you land on Matt Gay. And it feels like Matt Gay is going to be here for a minute because he's kicked really, really well. You had a variety of different guys on special teams like Corey Littleton, who are making their bones in this league as special teamers, making Pro Bowls, blocking kicks, field goals, everything that it was. And now he's down the road and has been gone for a little while. We saw the beginning of the season where you're having guys like Tutu Atwell return kicks. They had him in the second-round draft pick. Didn't work out. We get Brandon Powell kind of out of nowhere. All of a sudden, he pops one for a touchdown along the way. They bring him back next year. I just think that this is the part of the Rams roster that you're going to see churn more and more frequently along the way. You've got your established guys on the team. It's a little bit harder to turn those other guys, even your first string backup guys along the way. But when we're talking punters, when we're talking special teamers, when you're getting into that depth that we're talking about, I think these are going to be a lot of new faces for the Rams going forward. And this was something that they did a really good job with last year. Think about it. The Rams special teams for the first, call it 2/3 of the season, not very good. Not very good at all. They were not a factor in the return game. Johnny Hekker was not having a very good season by his standards. And quite frankly, they had a hard time covering kicks. They would give up a lengthy return seemingly once a game or so. They weren't giving up a bunch of touchdowns, but the other team would be starting on the 40, 45-yard line at least once a game or so, just because they would miss some guys. The Detroit game is the one that kind of pops out at me, where they had a couple of big returns, where they got beat on some trick plays a couple of different times. So it really was not very good. There was some speculation that, maybe there's something coming down the pike, because this is the first time you've seen a unit under Sean McVay really struggle the way that the special teams did. Sean McVay was steadfast and stuck with his guys. And next thing you know, by the time he got to the end of the line, the special teams were really good. The last quarter of the season were pretty good. The playoffs were very good. Matt Gay had a little bit of a weird deal where he missed a couple of kicks along the way after basically not missing a kick all season long. But he settled in and he made the kicks that he needed to make in the Super Bowl, and here we are. But I do think you're going to start to see a little bit of a turn and maybe a little bit more of a different dynamic on Rams special teams than we've seen in the last few years. And Riley Dixon, you might want to get in the bullpen and throw a few pitches and see what sort of arm you've got cooking, because that's something that the Rams have liked to do, not just under Sean McVay, but something that they did even with Jeff Fisher, that Johnny Hekker might have been one of their most valuable offensive weapons for a couple of seasons along the way. So welcome to the Rams, Riley Dixon, and throw a couple of touchdown passes along the way. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about the Rams and some player position ratings. And when you look at who they have on that list, right, there's only 22 guys on this list. All of them are coming from one side of the ball. That's coming up next. But first, let's talk about Built Bars, right? That sometimes you got to make some decisions in your food, right? If you got to a certain point in your life and you want to cut down on some calories and you want to make better food decisions, you can't have all the junk in your desk. You can't have it in your car. You can't have it at home, in your backpack, whatever it might be. Get rid of all the junky stuff in all those places and throw some Built Bars in there, right? This is allowing you to make a good decision. So when you get hungry and you start, I need something real quick, Built Bar. That's how you do it. And you don't have to worry about all the calories. You don't have to worry about all the sugar and all of those things. Built Bars, most of them 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Look at that compared to some of the other things that you're doing, whether it's your candy bars or chips or some of those other terrible choices that we all make occasionally. Built Bars is such a better way to go, and they're going to taste good. You're going to feel like you're getting a little treat along the way as well. They are all about the taste. They make it taste good, and then they put all the good stuff in it. You don't need to worry about it. They've already worried about it. They've got it done every single time. Here's how you order yours. Go to built.com, B-U-I-L-T, built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. And you're going to get 15% off of your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. And just going to throw this out there, coconut almond, probably not going to be disappointed. It's a pretty good way to go. All right, so when you think of the Rams, what do you think of? What's the first thing that pops in your mind? The Los Angeles Rams to you bring to mind what? For me, offense. For me, a young, dynamic, offensively oriented head coach who changed this team by being the guy that can find a way to score points, that can find a way to get guys open, that can find a way to design an offense that the rest of the league has really struggled to catch up to over the course of the last few years. Somebody that the reason the Rams have won the division 3 times in 5 years, the reason that they've been to the playoffs 4 times in 5 years, the reason they've been to the Super Bowl 2 times in 5 years, the reason they were Super Bowl champions just a few months ago is because the Rams can move the ball when they need to move the ball, that the Rams can get points, right? At least that's how I think about it. So there's something online where they were talking about the best player at each position in the field. So you get one, right? There's one left corner, one right corner, one defensive tackle on one side, one on another, one quarterback, one tight end, the whole thing, right? 22 people, 11 guys on one side, 11 guys on the other. Rams had 3 people ranked as the best player at their particular position. 3. Okay, nobody else. The only other team that had 2 were the Chiefs, who had Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Okay, pretty good choices. The Rams had 3. Probably not hard to guess that Aaron Donald is on that list, right? Okay, so sure. Probably not hard to guess that Jalen Ramsey is on that list. Sure. Jalen Ramsey is the best cover corner in the NFL. I'll buy that. Sure. Bobby Wagner is on that list too. Bobby Wagner is the best middle linebacker in football. Defensive tackle, middle linebacker, corner. Best player at their position. All 3 of these guys on the defensive side of the ball for the Rams. The Rams are an offensive team that just won the Super Bowl. I understand that the defense had to be great in the Super Bowl. The defense had to get some stops, but am I wrong? Am I the only one that thinks about the Rams as an offensively oriented team? And they've got 3 of the best players in all of the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. And oh, by the way, not having Cooper Kupp as the best wide receiver in football felt like a slight. I don't know if it was an oversight. I don't know if it was done intentionally, but I'm still waiting for, I get it, that maybe he's not going up and over and doing one-handed catches twice a game the way that some other guys do. I get it. Maybe it's not quite as flashy as some other guys may be, but what's the idea? The idea is to get open, right? Okay, he caught more passes than anybody else. Okay, but maybe he's not getting down the field. Maybe it's not for a lot of yards. Maybe they're just a little short underneath things. Oh, he had more yards than anybody else. Yeah, okay, but maybe he's not getting into the end zone. More touchdowns than anyone else. Triple crown of wide receiving. And yet he wasn't on the best at the position. But put that aside. That's wrong, but put that aside for a second. The Rams have figured out a way to be somehow, I don't know how they've done it, an under the radar defensive team despite having three of the best defensive players. And maybe it's because it doesn't have a catchy nickname. Maybe it's because they don't have they're not winning games, 8-2. They're not doing those sorts of things. That the Rams are winning games, 31-21, or they're winning games, 28-17. The Rams defense is just as potent as their offense, and it's just as star-studded as their offense. I get Matthew Stafford, big name in the NFL. Cooper Kupp, we just talked about. You have a guy like OBJ if he comes back. You have big name guys. Todd Gurley was about as big of a star in this league as there was for a couple of years. Jared Goff, number 1 draft pick. Offense. This team's defense may be just as potent, just as dynamic, and arguably more important than anything else that they've done. I saw that and it jumped off the page of me like, wait a second. The Rams are notorious because of their defense. The Rams have become this team because of their defense. And when you really stop and think, yep. And oh, by the way, the offense is still pretty much lights out too. So when does training camp start? When do we do the draft? When do we do training camp? When do we do all of these things so we can just get right to it and start that title defense all over again? It can't be fast enough before football season starts all over again. Okay. Coming up later on, I want to get into some YouTube comments like we like to do towards the end of the week. We'll do that on the next edition of Locked On Rams. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL corner Eric Crocker bringing the NFL Draft, and they bring it to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It too, just like Locked On Rams, is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams' house.